There, it says recording up at the top.
Got it.
But it's kind of a one by one connect with those would-be applicants and see what we can get in. But as you well, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but the portal has been not functioning very well since it reopened.
Right, and in some ways that can be a not necessarily a good thing, but it allows people to have a little bit more time. Slowing it down might actually help. I don't know.
Right.
Not good for us to trying to get stuff to SBA, but the upside is that client has a little bit more time to get their stuff together.
I agree.
And the time factor is really the biggest hurdle here, because in a normal loan process, you submit a loan and it goes through and somebody looks at it every day. And now if you submit and there's an issue, 2 or 3 days goes by and it might be too late. Funding might have already ran out. So
I agree.
So that's slowing it down.
See how they run. We'll
Yeah.
see how they run. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we had on starting Monday, we had 1,800 applications that were slotted to go to SBA 9:30 Central Time. So it's not a surprise that their system went down. I'm assuming every other bank had a backlog of applications waiting, same as we did. So
I think that's right.
Yeah. But it's been interesting conversations with people, just because they're used to working with their bank, but it's tough because not all of them have gotten through the process. So then it's and it's such a big automated novel process and developing so quickly. I don't have all the answers.
Right.
So those questions are, and people kind of understand that, but just trying to keep those lines of communication open can be difficult because.
I'm going to just take a second and pull the blinds behind me. It won't be so bright.
Good morning, Monica. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Pretty good.
Hello.
Here are the blinds.
That's right. There we go.
Hi, Shirley.
Hi, Heike.
Hi, Stacy.
Hello.
And Laura. Okay. I am going to just, so we don't get a lot of extra static, I'm going to mute some of you. And on the side, can you see the chat bar? If you have any questions, or if you want to say something, just let me know. Just type it in there. Morning, Jamie. Okay. Recording. Okay. Well, welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our first chamber chat. I'm Heike, the Executive Director of the DeForest Windsor Chamber of Commerce. And I'm very excited to have our guests today, come and offering their expertise in answering questions regarding the Payroll Protection Program. I'd like to introduce Luke Justman from Old National Bank. He's manager up right up here in DeForest. On a wave, Luke.
Hey, everybody.
We also have Tom Spitz, one of the founders and CEOs of Settlers Bank, also here in DeForest. Michelle Lawrie, the Community Development Director from the Village of DeForest. And Jamie Rybarczyk, from the Deputy Administrator and Director of Economic Development for the Village of Windsor. Thank you all for being here today. I really appreciate it. So last week, President Trump signed new legislation that would further assist our small businesses, and it also included for workers and hospitals. This legislation provides about $320 billion in additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program. With this new round of funding, President Trump will have signed $670 billion for this program, which is incredible. The bill also appropriated $60 billion for disaster loan programs and another $75 billion for hospitals and healthcare providers, and another $25 billion supporting testing efforts for state and local and tribal governments. So our focus today is going to be on the Payroll Protection Program. So it's my understanding the Small Business Administration, or SBA, along with the Department of Treasury, provides guidance to borrowers and lenders on the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, which was established with the CARES Act, which was one of the first acts to be established. So the Paycheck Protection Program is basically a loan designed to provide direct incentives for businesses to keep their workers on the payroll. Can you explain, either Luke or Tom, what are the requirements? I remember hearing one of the first ones started at only over 20 employees, but now I've heard it's up to 500 employees can be on this.
Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so it's anything under 500 employees. The initial round had certain exceptions for large. If it was a hotel or restaurant, I believe that exceptions have been taken out for second round, but I'm not sure. But it's intended for small businesses, anything under 500 people. So that includes sole proprietorships, partnerships, any size corporation or LLC under 500. So, yeah.
Great. And this is also for nonprofits and religious groups can also apply for PPP?
I believe they have to be for profit.
Is it
I don't know if you know the answer.
No, nonprofits can apply as well.
Oh, they can.
We processed several. Yep.
Okay. Are there,
Do
go ahead.
we know if there's other criteria? Because it's my understanding that one of our hotels tried to submit for it and they were denied. So do you know, aside from just the number of employees, what other criteria are required in order to make someone eligible?
The things that would eliminate somebody from eligibility would include if they are a convicted felon, if they've been involved in a loss to the SBA in the past. Some of these are kind of key disqualifiers. If somebody's had an application rejected, I wouldn't automatically jump to that conclusion. But there are very few elements that would disqualify somebody from participation. So I would hope that the person who got rejected was told why, so that they could solve that flaw.
I know the monies ran out. So with the restart that just started yesterday, will they have to reapply, or would they be able to just be in a queue and it would go to the next person in line, so to speak, to receive the funds?
It would be in the queue. What happens physically is when the information is entered into the SBA's system called ETRAN, people may have heard that. As soon as an application is successfully entered, a certification number is issued, which is the authority for the bank to fund under the program. So if an application was rejected for any reason, a certification number isn't received. If funds ran, when funds ran out, what the SBA did was it took the PPP module off of ETRAN. ETRAN is used for all of the SBA programs, so they just took it off. So there was no ability for any bank to enter data. There would be no confusion that maybe money got, maybe something was submitted and not funded. You would only, the only thing that were able to be entered were successful applications, and everything else didn't happen, so banks were queuing those. Does that make sense?
Yes. So, I know I've heard a lot about the 75 and 25 rule, where 75% needs to be for payroll and 25% needs to go towards utilities. Can you explain like what some of the utilities might be? Would it obviously rent and mortgages, but are there any health insurance or dental insurance or other items that would be qualified under that?
Luke, do you have a comment, or you want me? You go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, on the benefits side, the eligible, basically any benefits or payroll related expenses can fall under that payroll category. So that's the 75%. So that's any miscellaneous benefits, PTO, vacation, dental, vision, healthcare, all that stuff can fall in that 75% payroll related items. And then as far as the utilities, I'm not sure on the exact specifics, but maybe you have a better idea of the utility or the other overhead costs. I'm not as familiar with those, but I know at least if you spend 75% of the funds on payroll and payroll related expenses, that you'll be eligible for the loan forgiveness, or at least the full forgiveness.
There is no specific program language available yet that gives any detail on utilities. The language referenced mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. So there have been questions about which items would be included in utilities. Gas and electric, people presume. Does that include internet? Does that include, telephone? What are all the lists that are included? And there is no data on it. A big question mark at this point, and I'm sure you'll get to it, Heike, but a big question at this point is, what do people need to do to get forgiveness? And there is zero guidance on it. There's a lot of providers who are speculating, you probably have to do this and you probably have to turn in that, and some are even being more bold and saying this is what you need to do. But nobody who is professing that could have any idea, because there is not a document on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and there have been a lot of businesses that I've run into submitting applications as well. Just they have a lot of that concern, like you're saying. There's no clear guidance from SBA or the government about what the requirements are going to be, what the accounting requirements are going to be for this. What you can use for payroll, what you can use for utilities. So they're just advising, use the most clear accounting tools you can to make sure that the funds are going to per direction of the program. So at least 75% to payroll, and then the remaining overhead is, is right now, that's all we know for that. So.
Great.
Cool.
We have a question in the chat from Laura, who was approved on April 18th, and she hasn't heard anything since. Can you give an estimate about how long it would take to receive the monies?
The rule is within 10 days for the bank of receiving the certification. And so the certification is issued, as I mentioned, the moment an application is successfully uploaded into eTran, and the banks are all told that they need to get these funded within 10 days. Whether banks are getting that done on time or not, I couldn't say. I know Settlers Bank is getting everything done in time, so everybody's getting their funding within that 7-day period. But Luke, I don't know, anything different on your end?
Our time frames has been about under 10. It's been, from what I've seen, from once they hit eTran, somewhere between 3 and 5 days to get the loan documents in hand or sent to them and finalized. So there's that signing and scanning back that's in the client's hands as well of the loan documents. So, but usually within a couple business days, once we've gotten the eTran verification, those loan documents are going out to the customer and they've been contacted, letting them know next steps. So we've been within that time frame for the most part. So if you're past that 10 days or coming up on that 10 business days or the 10 days, maybe reach out to your financial and see if you can get some more information from them.
Okay. Go back up to Monica. Let's see. Part of the 75%, does it matter the number of employees? If someone wanted time off, will they stop you from getting the money because you are down an employee? I had another question similar to that, like if they also had already put someone or laid someone off, would that count against the PPP?
Similar to what Tom was saying with the accounting or the forgiveness aspect of the utilities and some of the other parts of the forgiveness, the direction on that part of the loan process has been pretty unclear. The focus has been on how to get the funds out the door. But there is language from the SBA saying that if you've laid off people, you need to rehire and get employment levels back to where they were. And if you don't, then your forgiveness may be either rejected or prorated in some way. So again, that language is pretty unclear, but there is parameters in there saying we will reduce forgiveness if you fail to maintain payroll and employment levels or bring them back to where they were prior to coronavirus. So what that looks like and what the exact definitional criteria will be is still unclear, but we know that you have to make an attempt and you have to get employment levels back up and to get payroll levels back up to prior to coronavirus levels. And you have until, I can't remember exact number, there's a document out there on SBA, but I think it's till June 30th. I don't know if you remember offhand, Tom.
Yeah, the SBA acknowledges that there is no clear guidance on this. The SBA states that it will be coming out with clear guidance. So there isn't confusion that the guidance doesn't exist. The SBA is clear that it knows it owes the guidance.
Okay.
One of the question and answer documents related to the program when it came out indicated that the meter would start on monitoring and measuring how money was forgiven beginning 8 weeks from the date that a client gets their first, the language says advance, but to my knowledge, everyone is funding 100% of the money at one time. but I'm just kind of I'm quoting the document. So it states that it starts and runs for 8 weeks from the time you get the money, but as Luke specified, there is absolutely no backstopping language about what gets counted and how it gets reported. But so far, everything that is required is coming solely off of company submitted payroll and tax paying information.
And that application process was similarly not vague, it was defined, but the parameters to submit your application were less stringent than what we're normally used to. You know, basically we asked for anything, any document or report that showed your payroll and taxes paid for benefits in 2019. So, you know, a lot of times banks require a certain type of document for a certain type of business. We skipped a lot of that. We just said, get us what you can show us for payroll and taxes on benefits paid to the state or and the federal government in 2019, and we'll use that to calculate and triple check your requested loan amount. And that doesn't mean that it's going to be lax on the back end on the accounting side for making sure it went to payroll, but like Tom said, there'll be more direction coming out from SBA, and in the meantime, just try to direct businesses to focus on getting the application in, because that's kind of the limiting step for a lot of people. And as more detail comes out, you'll be able to spend more time digging into that as a business owner.
Okay. I have another question in the chat. Do you need to have an account at your bank to file a PPP application? For either one of you.
That's going to go bank by bank and circumstance by circumstance, as I understand it. There is no program requirement, but there is also nothing within the program that compels a financial to act in one manner or another. Many are only able to do them for existing clients. We have been able to help small businesses that have not been with us. A lot of those businesses have been disappointed that their current provider isn't helping them, and we've opened up whole relationships for a number of people. We are not making it a firm requirement, but we're taking case by case what we can help with, simply because we don't have an unlimited capacity and we're kind of processing this through. But what I've been made to understand from banks around the country, certainly around the area, is that many are only helping customers and many are not participating in the program. And I don't quite know why they aren't. As Luke indicated, the process for getting these put through is, as he indicated, far less stringent than the typical SBA program. We have found that we have not made a strict requirement of that. We're just trying to help people get their loans funded.
If I might add something, my husband is the treasurer for our church, and that's a not-for-profit, obviously. And they had a relationship with a community bank, and that community bank did not have the desirability to do the PPP. So he had to search for another bank that was willing to accept them, and they had to open up a checking account so that they could submit their application.
Yeah, and kind of to echo Tom, we've mostly been focusing on finding or helping our clients here at for Old National, speaking specifically. That can mean any type of relationship you had previously with us. Even stuff people don't think of generally as an account. IRA, HSA, FSA, business, personal, CD, whatever that is. So if you're a business owner out there and you're wondering where you can go, think about those miscellaneous accounts that you may not think of traditionally as an account. So that's one option for you. You can always feel free to reach out to me. We generally haven't taken non-clients applications. We've taken some, but few. So if you want to, if that is interesting to you, obviously Tom said, you know, like Tom mentioned, they are taking applications at Settlers for non-clients. So that's an option. And you're always more than welcome to reach out to me and we can have that discussion too, on whether or not we can process the application for you.
I think everybody who is doing this is doing this in the spirit of helping the small businesses that need it. And I think largely really attempting to do what can happen. Differing organizations have different philosophies on that, but I think volume is focusing banks on their existing client base. We just happen to have a process that was efficient enough that we can get through the clients that we have and have taken care of those and then can get some additional ones in. It's just, it's a real challenge for a bank to do a brand new relationship with somebody just because it requires all of the additional identification and backup organizational documents. So if somebody's ready, then that process can be fairly efficient. If they aren't, and that has to be dug up and put together, what you kind of find is nobody will put an application through until they know that they've got all that driver's license and articles of organization information all ready to go.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot of talk that have everything that is required together rather than sending one piece here and one piece there. If it's all together, it'll process a lot faster.
All true.
Right. Another question I have received, can I apply for both PPP and the emergency injury disaster loan? Would they be able to qualify for both?
The answer is yes, you used to, but now there is not any more funding available for what they refer to as EIDL, the EIDL.
Yes.
That's been exhausted. So it's not an option today, but one didn't exclude the other. Okay. In that early application process.
Does anyone have any other questions?
I do, actually. If there's some chance, yeah, thank you. With the EIDL grants, Tom and Luke, I keep hearing different things. They're going to be funded again, and then maybe they're not going to be funded again. I know the last thing I heard is there was funding made available, and that they just aren't taking applications yet. Do you know on that when they will be or if they will be?
I haven't heard anything. Have you, Tom?
I looked yesterday afternoon. Everything we've been doing here has been off of official language. There are just dozens and dozens of organizations trying to offer their take on what's going on. So every time a new piece of news comes out, I'm sure anybody, Luke, you probably get the same thing. You get like a dozen emails from organizations saying the same thing. That said, as of yesterday, the SBA site had the statement on it that there was no longer any funding available under EIDL. So that's the last official word that I saw. One of the things that was going on with those is that that up to $10,000 type grant was able to be applied for before the PPP program was released. And then in the PPP application, it also asked if a EIDL loan had been applied for. And persons who said yes, the application added that $10,000 to their PPP loan. There are people who applied for the EIDL money who got that money and got their PPP loan funded that included the money that they had already applied for. You can follow this. So there are people that got an extra $10,000 of EIDL. They got it directly from the SBA, and then they got it included from their bank with the PPP process. How that gets itself worked out, no clue. No one, no, the SBA has said nothing about that activity.
Right. Similar to that, there were other people, there were businesses out there with questions about, well, I submitted an app through one bank and then, you know, I wasn't confident that they were going to do it. So I submitted another one through a different bank. You know, I've had a couple clients with multiple, you know, that have either don't bank with us or have multiple accounts, and they're, you know, because this process is novel and new, there's some unknowns out there. But they say, well, what if I apply to both? And my general response is that, you know, you're going to have to take that responsibility on yourself just because you're able to, you know, potentially get 2 applications through. I don't know what kind of double checking the SBA does if 2 applications come to them, but the business owner's got to take that on themselves to know that they're applying for these funds and what they're eligible for. And if they do apply at 2 different banks, they just have to decline one of them if they get through both. So similar to that with the EIDL, you can do both programs, but like you said, if you're end up getting double funded, it's on the business owner to make sure that they are responsible with those funds.
I can speak a little bit further to that just because we're entering these things directly. What does happen is we have had applications rejected because an application had already been put in. So what appears to be happening, Luke, and for others, is that an application won't go through, a PPP application won't go through twice. Once a certification is issued, I believe it's tracking by tax ID number. Another application won't happen. I had one client, we're sort of screening. There are providers who are saying apply in as many places as you can to make sure you get funding. I understand where that sentiment comes from, but it's really a drag on the entire system where we're trying to get as many people helped as possible. And if you've got a dozen of these, so I really caution against it. But that said, I had one client who gave me their applications because their primary bank just went dead air on them. They didn't even know that they had been received. Of the 4 applications that we received, 2 of them went through and 2 were rejected because they had already been put through. So my guess is that both institutions were probably putting these applications in at roughly the same time, and we made 2 and they made 2. And so they didn't double fund. They just got part of their money from one bank and part from us. But the process takes a little bit of time. So it is really, I guess it's on everybody's best behavior, whether they're attempting to put banks through all that extra work.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That's good to know that they don't have to worry about double funding at least. So
I agree that would be a bigger hassle if that was occurring. But I think that's probably one of the few checks that the SBA does have. Is it would appear that the E-Tran is tracking the EIN, the taxpayer ID number, whatever that happens to be. And once a certification has been issued on a number, then another one. Everything else rejects.
Right. Pete. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just wondering, Pete, if your question was answered or if you'd like to ask a question. Pete? Okay, so there's the.
Yeah, so he had a question.
Oh, no microphone. Okay, so he was asking that he wants to clarify that the information for the levels of payroll that need to be met for maximum forgiveness, is that the case? I have not been released yet.
Yeah, I don't know if Tom and I both touched on that a little bit earlier, but
Okay.
The exact details aren't out there. But you have to be at least 75% towards payroll and benefits. And if not, there is language in there saying the SBA will either not forgive the loan or prorate how much forgiveness they're going to give you. So there's the concrete language is at least 75% on payroll, and there'll be forgiveness. If you're under that, you're going to be either reduce the amount of forgiveness given or possibly withdrawn altogether. So I don't know if that sounds like that might be it, but okay. But yeah, the biggest thing right now is just getting people in and getting applied. Funds are starting to get to businesses, so it is starting to be a decision. They start having, we're starting to think about those implications on where are you spending the money. But for those that haven't applied yet, I would just encourage you to focus on making sure you get your application in and done correctly and completed the first time so that you go through without any issues. And then as more details come out, like Tom was mentioning, that SBA will be giving out more direct information on how to do that accounting for the loan forgiveness.
If I can expand on that, Luke said something earlier about how stringent the program is that I think may bear some commentary here, simply because this element that we're discussing and clarifying on is the most, it's getting the most attention right now because it's the information void. And what I would comment on, backing up what Luke said earlier, is the application process was decidedly very simple and very pro-applicant compared to any of the other SBA programs. The SBA has a reputation of being very detail-focused, a lot of information, a lot of specific forms. That's been the history. PPP has been very focused on getting money out, as Luke has been saying. So there is no information. That void causes stress for a lot of the applicants. If they're helpful words, it would be to suggest that there is nothing in this program that necessarily says that the process to apply for forgiveness should be any more complex than the process to apply for the application. No certainty there, but it's been pretty simple. The second part of this is that these are a 2%, or these are a 2-year 1% loan with no payments required for 6 months. So that for an applicant to have difficulty deciding how to apply the money and try and contemplate the consequence, each applicant is clearly motivated to get 100% forgiveness where they can get it. But the downside of not being able to meet one of these requirements for forgiveness has seemingly pretty minor consequences. I don't think anybody wants to think that they don't get the benefit of the money and have to just give it all back or pay it all back, or they've spent it and they can't give forgiveness. But if you're using payroll money for payroll and you're using utility and rent for rent, seems like this should be fairly straightforward. And there is, again, the SBA continues to state that it knows that it owes the documentation on the back end of the program, but has never offered an estimated timeline for when that'll come. There's just nothing on it.
We have another question from Charles. I received the IEDL advance, but nothing else. What can I expect? Additional No, there's no more additional IED funding, or is that it? Doesn't have a mic.
I don't know if you're familiar with EIDL, Tom, but I've been focusing almost entirely on Paycheck Protection Program. So I'm just not versed in the EIDL very well, to be honest.
What I can share was that the EIDL was the first that came out. It had the grant component of it. A lot of us are familiar with the $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
And those were a direct submission to the SBA. And they went quiet for a while, and then they started getting funded. So that money is getting pushed out. As we said before, that also got added to the PPP application. So it's feasible that if you applied for the EIDL grant and applied for a PPP, you would have been asked to include that $10,000 on your application. and you could find that you get it twice. How the SBA will resolve that is unclear. The second part of the question may well relate to EIDL money was also available in the form of a loan with specific program parameters to borrowers that would be repaid. It was not intended to be a forgivable loan structure that had to be applied for directly to the SBA through a CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution. Forward, Forward Community, I always get the organization name. There's one in Madison that could take that application and submit it. I know that they have been processing applications. I am not aware that any applicant has heard back. I'm not aware that they haven't. I just haven't seen anything publicly that says that those are being responded to. I think, as Luke was saying, we were both sharing, the SBA seems to be so focused on pumping out the PPP money, and then this EIDL loan application really has to go through some level of underwriting. It doesn't surprise me that it would take a length of time, but the EIDL program also didn't say anything in it about how long an application would take to process. There was no data, so it's only probably going to be understood based on when the press starts covering that people are getting money.
Sure. Shirley, did you want to ask your question?
I did put it in the Zoom group chat.
Yep.
It was probably answered by Tom. When it comes to all the documentation after they get their loan that they have to follow up, is it to the SBA that they submit all that documentation in order to be considered for forgiveness?
The PPP documents, the interim rule, all say that information would get submitted to the bank. So the bank that processed the application would receive the information for forgiveness as it's disclosed at this point. Luke, anything different?
Yeah, that's as far as I'm aware too. But we've had no internal mention of collecting forgiveness. We've had no communication. It's been entirely focused on getting the funds out still. So yeah, I haven't heard anything else from the SBA other than that. Just mention that we will be responsible for it. I don't know what that'll look like exactly.
So this is probably also in the context of that question, maybe something to demystify on the bank side. Anybody who applied would understand that there's a very simple set of questions that you ask, and you simply submit a number that equates to 2.5 times your qualifying expenses, and the application goes in. For the bank, all the banks have to do is validate in some reasonable manner that the number that you put on the application matches the data that you put in. It doesn't have to be onerous, and banks aren't going through significant computations. That data simply somebody logs into this E-Tran system and just fills in certain required fields for E-Tran that are sought, including largely just that number. So all this, the supporting data that you are giving to your bank is not getting forwarded to the SBA. It is just residing with your bank. There's every indication in the process to suggest that what will happen on the back end could likely be that applicants will be asked to submit some validating information. It will be on a form, or it may just simply be send in the same kind of payroll data you sent in the first time with a forgiveness application. Again, there's nothing official, but it seems to be queued up, that bank will then go back into E-Tran and submit the required information and probably get some sort of a forgiveness notice. Now that's speculating, which Luke and I have been careful not to do. But as we get through kind of the core questions and people are sort of scratching their heads going, what might this be like? That's maybe a way to visualize it, because that is the part that the banks are doing. We have not submitted all of the data that you submit in with your application to the SBA. It just isn't part of it.
Do we have any other questions?
I'll just, as a small business owner, I'm struggling with, I have a staff member who has kids that are from home, right? So she is elected to not work with me right now because she needs to be home. So she's on temporary layoff. And so if we apply for these loans, I mean, it's really hard for us to know if you're going to say 75%, if I'm down an employee or two because they have to be home with their children. What advice do you give us small business owners that are trying to navigate, well, I had to put someone on temporary layoff because they physically cannot work with a baby at home. And then I don't want to take a loan like this if it's not, you know, going to make sense for us. So what are you giving for advice for us small business owners that have been kind of navigating through that challenge?
Let me jump in if I can, because this has come up a number of times for us here. The way to look at this, because we don't know, there isn't good right? There's no information on what the SBA is going to require. And that would, but that if you apply for money based on your payroll and you don't spend the money that you applied for because workers won't come back, you choose not to bring them back, they have conflicts like the one you described, so they're just not on your payroll. It could be reasonably expected that that portion of the loan you borrowed would not be forgiven. It's also been a clearly stated component of the program, and specifically on the application, that the loan has no payment requirement for 6 months, and it has a 1% interest rate. So it's reasonable to suggest that if you don't spend the money on payroll and it's not eligible for forgiveness, you would be in a position of, you'd make a business choice of immediately repaying it, in which case there's no benefit and there's no consequence. Or you would decide that a 1% interest rate on that portion of that loan is attractive enough for you to keep for up to 2 years, but that would be an individual decision. But others are facing that same thing, where there are employees who believe or feel are making more money on unemployment than they would have if they go back to work, and the employer is torn between what do they require, because they can't get the money forgiven if the employee doesn't come back to work. There are small businesses making those decisions every day. Luke, I don't want to monopolize.
No, that was perfectly stated, I think, Tom. It's that decision is on the business, or, you know, that every business and every position is going to be different. But like you said, you know, the main point of is that the terms of the loan are so attractive that it costs you very, very little to take out the loan. And you don't have to make payments for 6 months. So should you take it out and not need it, the cost to you is very minimal, other than, you know, the hoops you got to jump through to do a loan. You know, do the application, sign the loan documents, get all your stuff together. You know, that's really the investment for you. I mean, 1% is a small amount to have access to the actual cash should you need it. And like you said, every business is going to have to make their own decisions, especially those service industry or frontline, what we think of as frontline staff, you know, restaurants, hotels, whatever else. People that were working in restaurants may not want to come back. My brother manages a restaurant, and he, you know, they wanted to bring him back to work at 75% income full time. He lives down in Nebraska, and he's got an 8-month-old kid. So, you know, the choice for him is, do I come back at 75%, come off unemployment and put my kid at risk? Or do I stay home and take the unemployment for 4 months? And the business decision for the business owner is, I got to get my people back and employed at 75%, or I'm going to lose this money. And, you know, for that, who knows what the right decision is for every business. It's hard to say, but the terms are just good enough that it really doesn't cost the business anything to take out the loan and pay it back should they not need it or not use it.
There's no indication too, it's either going to be numbers or percentage, right? So that if you do have some staff that decided to stay on, you could bonus them, or, you know, a thank you of some sort, or, you know, increase the pay on some versus a numbers of keeping a certain amount of employees. Or I had just hired someone and I mean, I can't train someone while I'm at home, you know, like, so it'd be interesting. That we have no idea on, right? That's what we're still waiting for, is if it's a numbers versus percentage.
Right. And I don't know, maybe you have more a clearer idea, Tom, but from what I've seen and heard, there's really no guidance on that. I don't know if you've heard anything else, but.
No, and I haven't, and I have heard the creativity that you're describing used a couple different times. If I don't use this all for payroll of 100% of my people, am I able to pay out hazard pay, right, quote unquote hazard pay bonuses, or just service bonuses because they did in fact come back, and is that even going to matter in the numbers? I've heard that. It's not the first time I've heard that, and it is absolutely unaddressed in anything, even in the speculation documents. It just talks about the payroll number, and then it's monitored over the 8 weeks after you get the money, and it doesn't. There's everything that anything that you would be hearing on the street, so to speak, about that you have to bring all of your employees back, or they have to be you have to bring them back by a certain date. It's all just taking conjecture and filling the voids in what is missing in an actual program document. So there's a lot of that conversation out there, but as you pointed out, there's absolutely silence on that expectation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Too bad.
So you would be, the business owner is, if you're doing those types of things, you know, like you said, hazard pay or bonus or whatever, hiring new employees or different employees or at a different rate, those are all going to be things that we just don't know. Like Tom said, we just don't know about. We just don't have any guidance from SBA yet.
There's a risk that if you agree to that up front and pay it out, that there could be something that comes along that makes that not qualified later. So whether that is needed as an incentive to get people back to work, or whether you're in a position to surprise your valued employees at a later date, is something that maybe gets known. And that's why, again, it's unfortunate. I will go on record as saying I find it amazing, and I really applaud what Treasury and SBA is doing, because to kick out a program of this size, this started taking applications a week after the law was passed. It's crazy.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of speed bumps. There's been a lot of things that didn't go perfectly, but I find it astounding that it went as smoothly as it has. This other document is really critical to everybody who's applied, but it's been 3 weeks, again, on this Herculean thing. And so that's not inherently shocking, but boy, it sure would be nice to have it out.
Yeah. There was one more question, or wonder if it's answered, but some of their staff are teenagers. They've been continuing to pay the adults, but not the teens. And none of the employees, none of the staff are full-time. They're all part-time. Does that matter if they're a full-time or a part-time? Just as long as they're on the payroll?
Just as long as they're on the payroll. The number, what's important is the number on payroll and the amount of overall payroll.
So they should include everybody when they apply.
The program specifies the full-time equivalent calculation. So 2 people working 20 hours equals 1 full-time equivalent.
Got it.
So it's using that. So if there are a series of part-time people, it's the calculation to get them up to the full-time equivalency calculation, and then that's the count. So yes, they can be included. This I'll also say, this gets back to something that I think maybe won't happen in the second round, but happened in the first round. As we stated, you can only apply once. So there were a series of clients who submitted applications based on the payroll to hurry up and get it in, and then came back later and said, whoops, I just realized I can include benefits. I just realized I can include this and that and the other. Can I resubmit? In our case, we were able to rescue and save some of those applications, allow them to resubmit and catch their bigger number up. Once you've had something funded, if you leave off qualified expenses or you leave off people, you cannot go back and reapply. So I mean, at some level, you want these things to be as accurate as possible. But if somebody's confused, concerned, doesn't know which way to apply, I guess my commentary, it's my opinion, would be you're almost better off defaulting to the bigger number, because the implication is if you made a good effort to apply legitimately and you calculated something incorrectly and it's not forgivable, it goes back to what we were discussing before, which is, so pay it back. You know, don't spend what doesn't qualify, and pay it back. And there's no interest or payment required for 6 months, so you've got that window to get this straightened out.
Makes sense. Yep. Great. I am recording this, and I was just wondering if it would be all right if we shared information for people to contact you or somebody that can help them, if it's not directly you, someone in your banks to answer any questions, or maybe I can just email questions to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind giving my info either. If you just thinking, get contact info, email, phone number, that type of thing.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah. My name is Luke. I'm here at the manager at the branch, Old National Bank in DeForest, right out here on Main Street. My phone number is 608-842-8583. You can leave me a message. That's my direct line. If I don't pick up, I can check that via email. So even if I'm not here for the day, I can check that. Otherwise, my email is luke.justman@oldnational.com, and that's luke.justman@oldnational.com.
And then for me, Tom Spitz at Settlers Bank. The best number to call is going to be our main phone line, which is 608-842-5000. And we'll grab the information from you if you call in and get the first available person to call you back. I'm happy to participate in that as well, but we want to make sure that we can get you the first available call. If you have any specific email questions for me, I am tspitz, TSPITZ, @settlerswi.com. And again, happy to help.
Thank you. So we have Jamie from the Village of Windsor and Michelle from the Village of DeForest. Do you have any information that you could add coming from the villages?
Just from the Village of Windsor's website, so we try to do our best on a daily basis to keep our website updated with a lot of the resources that were discussed here today, as well as my contact information. So if there's any businesses within the Village of Windsor that are looking for some additional assistance, feel free to reach out to me. So it's a very fluid situation that we're in, and we're trying to do the best that we can to help out businesses. But it's a daily task to stay on top of everything that's
It sure is.
And I would just echo what Jamie said. We're trying to be a conduit of information, and as I think Tom said earlier, not interpret it, but really just be that conduit of information for different programs, different grant programs, what the state, the county, and all of those just opportunities, trying to get those out there to see what fits for each particular business. And we're telling each business to kind of make sure they're dealing with their accountant and their banker as well on those programs and what makes sense for them. But I just want to add that we are here for any questions. Just like Jamie said, love to be someone that just is here. We want to have an open door policy. for questions or for any ideas. You know, we've had some great ideas from some businesses is how do we as the village help you? So things such as what we're doing, kind of like a recreational bingo, where we're encouraging our residents to go out and shop local. And if they do that, we're giving them gift certificates, things like that. And I think people have all kinds of ideas that are fun. So what can we do to really help the businesses? And so if you do have ideas, developdeforest.com is my website, and you can get to me through there.
Great. Thank you. Yes, I know the chamber is floating around an idea of doing a community poker game where participating businesses would hand out the chamber playing deck, and the resident with the best hand at the end of the week would win $25 in chamber bucks to be spent at the participating businesses. So if you're interested in that, anyone, give me a call. Or email me. I just would like to thank all of you for being a part of our first chamber chat and providing your excellent experiences with this PPP and how it's changing daily, and it's a little vague, but we'll be able to understand it better as the time runs on through this SBA.gov. I recommend everybody go to SBA.gov. They have a lot of information there. And also on our chamber website, I've put all of our information up there, as well as from FEMA and WEDC and all of the CARES Acts and information from the government and from Governor Evers as well. So thank you all for being a part of it, and have a great day. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your expertise, Tom and Luke.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.